Hey, John,
No.
how are you?
Wow, it's a rapid return. We were late last week, and now we're sort of on time this week. But this is not going to be a Hallmarked Man shed tools show. I'm working on a couple
Okay.
of things. I'm working on the narrative, the embedded narrative. Rowling writing about
Yeah.
writing. There's also some great stuff there about basically Freemasonry, I think, and about characters talking as if they're writers of detective fiction. That's always fun. Um, uh, yeah, it's just funny for me to see the Met and the Red Caps talking about misdirection. This is great.
Yes. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
anyway,
And and
but
and and Strike mentioning how the plot is too complicated. That
that's
was
right.
just lovely.
Anyway, it's gonna be my fourth read for me to go through the book and do all that. We're really waiting on strike finders. Please, Patricio, help us out. Um, anyway, no, I've been told there are 5 mentions of misdirection in there.
Yeah.
All right, so because that's not ready, I've just gotten 3 new books on Freemasonry.
Okay.
One is the Bridge to Light. The other is a really fascinating one called That Religion in Which All Men Believe from the University of California Press, which is the history of Freemasonry in the United States. As much as Freemasonry has a place in European history,
Yeah.
it has a remarkably disproportionate place in American history. I mean, I don't know how many of the so-called founding fathers in the United States were Freemasons, but it's a good percentage.
Yeah.
And it shows in our currency. I mean, Franklin Roosevelt's uh, um, cabinet was almost all Freemasons. So it's a big deal in American history. And I thought I'd look into that as well. Anyway, that's what we're not going to do today, Nick,
Okay.
because we promised um, our listeners. This was a weird overlap. The first week we had Hallmarked Man, a murder mystery
Yeah.
with really some graphic, horrible crimes and murders in them. Um, there was the coincidence of the Charlie Kirk assassination in the United States in north central Utah. I assume most of our listeners know what that's about. I'm not going
Yeah.
to
I
go
think
into that.
even in the UK it was a huge story. Not many of us. Certainly, I was completely unaware of Charlie Kirk as a person. Were aware of who he was, what he stood for, unless you were very politically engaged. But it was a huge story. It was lead items on most of our daily news.
Huh. I make a point to check in on the Daily Mail just because I love a good tabloid newspaper, and they also cover stories in the United States that U.S. media won't cover.
Yeah,
Um, and so I was astonished at the number of deaf Charlie Kirk stories. Charlie Kirk, I'd seen I don't know how many videos of his conversations with college students. Um, I was neither a fan nor a critic. He was just
yeah,
a person. He was a notable person, and
and
he's
I
most important to Americans. I think his influence will be most important and most immediately felt in that he was responsible for the um, um, union alliance of Robert Kennedy Jr. and Donald Trump. That he was the man that brought those two together, which almost certainly was what was responsible for his winning in 2024.
yeah,
So I mean, I mean, that alone makes him a history maker. And the guy was only 31, and really remarkable story. But it had a J.K. Rowling uh, play out
yeah,
that people wanted us to discuss because it really is important. And we were in the rush to first start. We were doing our first and second and third reads of Hallmark Man, and we thought it was a bad time to do that. We're 5 weeks in now, Nick, and this is actually there is a Hallmarked Man connection.
Yeah.
So we can get to that. I mean, Rowling has said things, three things that are connected. The first one is a statement of definitions, which is now pinned to the top of her Twitter feed. So 14 million people, they come to her site to see what she's saying. They see that first. That resulted in I think a friendly question saying, well, what beliefs have you changed in your life? And she was, a very generous response to can you think of a more personal question?
No.
That's really like, tell us about the lenses through which you see the world and how you've switched those out. I mean, that's pretty fundamental about what a person is. And then the Emma Watson piece, because that was largely, I think, about Watson's trying to segue the narrative about her position on radical trans activism and her relationship with J.K. Rowling. And Rowling was having none of it. And so did a big takedown. That all that's about the beliefs thing. So it's the specifically the beliefs that Rowling talked about. I'm going to do that. But how do we get from Charlie Kirk to that statement of beliefs, Nick? That's a Lake question, I think. Because it wasn't stated when she put those four statements up. She didn't say this is about Charlie Kirk. No. But I think it obviously was.
Yeah. So I think that there were a number of things going on. So not so much as the United States, I think, but in the UK, people on the left of the political spectrum seemed unable to state their horror of the assassination without some condemnation of his politics. And the more thoughtful center left, which is where most of J.K. Rowling's political tribe were condemning this. So the likes of her publisher, many people that she follows, even very left-wing members of her turf confraternity were calling out other leftists who were not saying that Charlie Kirk deserved what he got, but were unable to state their horror that this was happening without a but at the end of it. So I think that's what generated J.K. Rowling's statement. If you believe free speech is for you, but not your political opponents, you are illiberal. Now, there's one thing. There's one thing that leftists and proud socialists absolutely hate is being accused of being illiberal, even when they are spouting the most totalitarian nonsense.
That's interesting because I didn't get that from the liberal, but I'm going to push back on you're saying that's what the cause of her posting those things was.
Yeah,
I think the cause was much more direct in that on Blue Sky and on Twitter, other places, there was a rush after the Kirk assassination for leftists to say, hey, that was great. Now kill Trump.
Yeah.
Good shot, buddy.
Yes.
Now take out J.K. Rowling. Rowling was always in the top 2 or 3 names that were in those mentions, which is really odd. It's like, I mean, that the left has decided that Rowling is in the same ilk as Donald Trump. That clearly, I think, disturbed her and alerted all of her center-left friends in the UK, those marvelous socialists and communist sympathizers, I should say, What's her daughter? Her daughter was named after one of the great communists of the. Uh,
Jessica.
anyway, that Rowling has been threatened with assassination repeatedly over the last 4 years, 5 years.
Yes. Yeah. So
And
this isn't new
to see a
in and
man
of
shot
itself.
dead in the middle of exercising his free speech rights, and people who disagree with him coming up and arguing
Yeah.
with him. Rowling has said that she could paper her house with a number of death threats, rape threats, attacks on her house, attacks on her children. That she clearly feels this was a thing. And so once that assassination happened and the response to include death threats to her happened, she came out with it's either a creed or a manifesto. It's this set of definitions that she put up.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you talked about the first one. If you believe free speech is for you, but not your political opponents, you're illiberal. Now that's my response to that as an American was that's not really a word. That's not, illiberal. I mean, obviously it's a word, but basically saying you're not a liberal. And the word liberal, can mean so many different things, but that I immediately just threw up my hands and said, "Wow, that's a nothing definition." Now, but you saying that in the UK that has a very powerful,
Oh yes. Yeah.
immediate
So
feeling,
so
and I
so in the UK, the word liberal has, I guess, more depth because for many years it was the name of the left-wing party in our two-party system. So we had Tories and Whigs. The Tories became Conservatives. So they were the people who believed in maintaining the status quo. And then there were the Radicals, the Whigs, and they became the Liberal Party. So they are liberal too, changing the way Britain was run for the better. So they were the party of progress. And that was true really all the way up until the Second World War, when the Socialist Party, the Labour Party, started gaining ground among all sections of society. After the Second World War, really the Liberal Party took a back seat. But that word liberal still means that you are accepting and open to ideas. It's not so much as socialism, which is belief in society. Socialism is you wish to construct the society that will serve the members of that society.
Marxism.
Liberalism doesn't go as far as that. It essentially just says that you are open to ideas, with the sort of subtext of you're going to be open to the right ideas. You're not stuck in the way that you think.
Yeah, that's definitely about it's a progressive.
Yeah.
We call that progressive in the United States, but yeah, liberal was in the United States was turned into a bad word by Ronald Reagan, and the progressives in the United States have taken that word because liberal became so radioactive in the United States.
But I hear some right-wing commentators, American right-wing commentators, they call themselves classical liberals.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. The definition of liberal being so loaded, because
Yeah.
conservatives see themselves as tied to the Enlightenment, in which these liberal principles were enunciated for free speech and such.
Yeah.
And that's their definition of that. And basically, the rights assigned to government in our Constitution for free speech and stuff like that. That's classical liberalism. And so, yeah, it's the first definition she gave was a fail because, well, maybe it wasn't a fail in the UK. You say it has a very specific meaning,
Yeah.
but in the United States, it was like, what do you mean by that, dear? Because I mean, because Rowling then immediately said, I've got borders on my free speech. And she
Yeah.
talked about what's his name? The shock jock political commentator that talked about Sandy Hook and the murders there.
Oh,
She basically said he
yeah,
shouldn't have rights to free speech because he hurt people. But of
yeah,
course, he was taken to court and bankrupted because of that stuff. I mean, the system actually worked for him. So it was like,
yeah.
but you wouldn't want him to have free speech, even though the system worked to correct him. Okay, maybe you wanted bigger punishments for him. I don't know, but it was sort of like, well, and then what's Marmite?
What great question, John. What's Marmite? So, Marmite is a savory spread. It's manufactured as a byproduct of brewing beer. So it's a yeast extract from brewing beer. It's got it's very savory, salty, and to use a Japanese term, umami flavor. And it is, depending upon whether you like it or not, absolutely delicious. Spread very thinly, never spread it thickly, very thinly on crisp, dry toast.
Now, why did I ask you that question, Nick?
Because famously, it, people who aren't British hate it as a matter of course, but even within the UK, it is very much you either love Marmite or you hate Marmite. So it's become
And so,
synonymous with something that you don't get um, a grayscale. It's either black or white. A Marmite thing is you either love it or you hate it.
this is English natto, is what you're
Yeah,
telling me.
yeah. Oh no, no,
So,
no, 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 no. It's not natto. No, because nobody likes natto. Even the people that pretend they like
oh,
natto
I
don't like
love that
natto.
daisuke desu. What are you talking about? Love natto. Anyway, someone asked her in the Twitter feed, okay, you're all for free speech, but what about Marmite?
Yeah,
And she said, "Oh boy, you're really pushing me here." Um, and about it leads into the next one where she, in
yeah,
her 4 definitions, she says, if no contrary evidence could change your beliefs, you're a fundamentalist. Now,
yeah,
this was by far the most important of the 4 that she put up because of the consequent
yes,
conversations. But again, I'm going to say what it says in the AP style book or whatever. The word fundamentalist has a meaning, and to decide you're going to change the definition to mean people you don't like or something is not, kosher or whatever. I mean, it's to use a word, maybe I've just changed the meaning of that word. Anyway, I mean, you're a fundamentalist. Means that you're a member of a early 20th century American Protestant, Christian sect that believes in the inerrancy of Christian scripture. Now, that's to use that word to mean stupid people I don't like is a
no,
real shame. It's a
I
real
don't think
shame.
I don't think Rowling's going that far, and that may be the definition in the Webster's dictionary, but I'm fairly sure that Oxford Dictionary wouldn't take a North American sect as a definition. So I believe Rowling's meaning here is there are some things that are fundamental to you. So um, so fundamental to you that no matter what evidence can be presented that your belief is wrong, you will not accept it. And I think that's true for most people. I think most people have these beliefs. But if you're for most people, those beliefs are really very narrow and really very personal to who they hold themselves to be. If you extend that to whole swathes of your belief, then yes, I think you're a fundamentalist because you
Okay,
you
okay.
don't accept evidence.
Do you see the inherent contradiction of that statement inside this context of definitions?
No, I think
The
they work.
inherent contradiction. Let me share it with you if you don't see it right
Okay.
away. Is that she's offered all of these statements
Yeah.
as statements of as her fundamental beliefs, which are
Yes.
unchallengeable to her. That these are her absolute tenets of the thing. So no contrary evidence could change her belief that someone who has a belief which cannot be overturned is a fundamentalist. That makes her a fundamentalist. So I mean, it's an empty statement because it immediately turns back on itself. Everybody has beliefs, and they can be
Yes.
right beliefs or wrong beliefs. If they happen to be right beliefs, you don't want to put a tag on it saying, well, you're a moron for believing that, even though it's objectively true. So, again, Rowling is a great writer. No one has
Yes.
been a better champion for understanding her work at depth than I have been. But when she gets into this field, she it just reflects the poverty of her experience with thinking at depth about theology, philosophy, those kind of things. I mean, but we're gonna get to her theological opinions
Yeah.
later. But because there you
I
have a real contradiction. You have a woman that writes about subjects in a profound fashion, in a systematic fashion, and then says, but I don't really hold that. I mean, it's an amazing spot. And I've been accused, Nick. Someone recently shared a blog post with me by someone who said that you got to respect this woman's boundaries of things that you can talk about her about. Well, here she's just invited this. I mean, this is
yes.
when she offers these as her fundamentalist beliefs, then I can say, well, gosh, you just said that's not a good thing. Anyway, we're going to come back to that one because that was the one she got the most pushback on and the most questions about, and
Yeah.
she was the most generous in. How about this? If you believe the state should punish those with contrary views, you're a totalitarian. Well, she contradicted that again by talking about Jones and Sandy Hook. But I get it. That's totalitarian in the United Kingdom has a much greater force than it does in the United States. I'm thinking.
Yes. I think that would be true if, again, for the narrow definition, if the state punished you because of your views. If the
Well,
state,
for me, the COVID experience in the United States, and I
yeah,
know it was much harsher in the United Kingdom, shows that
yes,
Rowling is a totalitarian. She was totally on board with those who were dishing out disinformation about the hysteria that went on for 5 years or 4 or 5 years.
yes, but
That she thought the state should punish those,
I don't think in the UK or the US anyone was punished because they believed COVID didn't exist. There was no one that was punished because that's what their belief was. There was no one. There was no one that was punished for believing that the COVID legislation that was brought out in the US and the UK was wrong or too harsh. Or
and here, Nick, you are absolutely wrong, and it's forgivable because I'm sure it
yeah,
wasn't covered at all in the United Kingdom. But the United States government, and this is in the Twitter files, the United States government forced social media to shut down people, their access to communication, because they were, especially the disinformation dozen, one of whom is now, a member of a vaccine committee in the United States. I mean, he's just the guy who invented essentially the whole technology that was the engine for the COVID vaccines. Now that they were directly punished, and now their cases are in the courts, and they're going to get a huge payout. But the state certainly did punish those people with contrary views, and they really twisted the arms of it, except for the fact that Elon Musk bought Twitter. Twitter was becoming an absolute free speech free zone, meaning that you couldn't say anything there without getting punished immediately for speaking contrary to the narrative, and that was by government influence.
okay, government influence, because of course in the US you have the First Amendment, which we don't
Yes,
have in the UK,
that's
and
right.
that the First Amendment absolutely prohibits the state from infringing what people say. Now, the First Amendment doesn't go as far as social media. So a social media site can and does limit what I say. And that's permissible because it's not covered by First Amendment, because it isn't the United States government.
Absolutely. But when the United States government tells that independent agent and publisher what they can and cannot publish, and still have the good, be in the good graces of the government, which does have the ability to legislate against those publications, online or not, that was punishment. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I get how Rowling can say this, because the state in the United Kingdom has a different set of powers, different set of limitations. To her, the state should punish those as like arrest them or kill them or whatever. In the United States, it's the state cannot restrict free speech, or that's a punishment. And anyway, so that was a weird one for me, because I was like, wow, we have an immediate experience here of what's that. And I have to say, Rowling, I don't have a detailed knowledge of what Rowling said and didn't say all through COVID. She was in the midst of the worst heat of the trans war and her cancellation at that point. I don't think she said that much about COVID, except to say "oorah" for the NHS. Fine, that was very different than crush these people that are against these horrible vaccines, or against these wonderful vaccines. Excuse me. Anyway, so that's that one for someone in the United States. That's like, wow, you're saying that anybody who exercised their free speech rights in the United States during COVID, that was told that was a bad thing, you're a totalitarian. She's really then just in a blanket thing against the entire Biden left wing of the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
Last one. If you believe political opponents should be with violence or death, you're a terrorist. Terrorism, Nick, what is your definition of terrorism before you read this piece?
So a terrorist aims to achieve political change through fear of violence.
Do you think that lines up with, if you believe political opponents should be punished with violence or death, you're a terrorist?
Absolutely. And the important word in there is political. So essentially, if you put fear of violence or death into your political enemies, you're a terrorist.
Well, I think that it's terrorism is usually aimed at non-political actors. So a terrorist is someone that creates terror in the streets, or in the communication spheres, by blowing up buildings, blowing up buses. Like the terrorism that we see in Israel is largely done against obvious political actors, though they're assassinations. Yes. I mean, certainly terrorism includes the category of direct political violence. But Rowling is saying you're a terrorist if you believe this, when in fact terrorism is a much larger category. This is a relatively small set of how a terrorist acts.
So she's I think she's being quite clever here on this last one.
Okay.
So if you believe anyone should suffer violence or death, for whatever reason, you're not a terrorist. Because the definition of terrorist is the aim to achieve political change. Now, unless you're actually going to bomb or shoot people, which even most of the crazies on Twitter, so far at least, are refraining from doing. But what they are doing, and we mentioned about the threats to J.K. Rowling, is they are threatening violence and death. And so it's that aiming for political change by the threat of violence or death to their political opponents. They aim to achieve political change. I will make you too scared to say that I believe transgender women are men. Or at least I'm going to make you too scared to say that.
Well, there's the question. Which of these four categories Do you think Rowling applies to the people that call for her death on Twitter, social media, articles? I mean,
So I think in different ways, all four of them, and she's absolutely she's taking aim here, not so much at the crazies, so the blue sky people who are saying Charlie Kirk, great, let's do Rowling next. She's not aiming that at those. They're beyond saving. So she's aiming that at the fashionable left wing champagne socialist commentators with trendy political opinions, and above all, um, a, a, a popular and populist image. That's who she's aiming them at. They're the people that are going to be most stung by. I'm not a liberal. I am not a fundamentalist. How dare you call me totalitarian? What do you mean I support terrorism?
okay. These conversations are. I hope our audience finds these as helpful as I do, Nick, because an American reads this. First of all, it came out of nowhere. She put it no context. She didn't say this is about what happened with Charlie Kirk.
No.
I don't think anybody at the day it appeared could read it outside of that context. But still, she's pinned it up there now.
Now it's separated, isn't it? Yeah, now it's separated. So people coming months later to her Twitter page, this is, as you say, this is a statement of belief now.
Yeah, and again, I think she's offering them as absolutes to her, which of course makes her a fundamentalist. And she admits, which brings us to the next question, that she was almost immediately asked, what belief do you have? What fixed beliefs have you changed?
This was quite brave, wasn't it? So this was essentially, and she could have ignored it. She could have absolutely ignored it. But I think she took that as okay, all right. If you think that's true, walk the walk. What beliefs? If you think you're a fundamentalist, if you will accept, refuse to change your beliefs despite the evidence, explain to us which beliefs you've changed. And as you say, John, she was incredibly generous with what she gave.
Yeah, this I just looked this up. This is from a Kev R.
Yeah.
Desi Vendi at Desi Vendi. I don't know if that's one of Rowling's, one of her friends or what. I assume it was a friend because
no, so they're not. They don't. It's not. They follow Rowling, but Rowling doesn't follow them.
Great.
So
he's one of 14. He's one of 14 million, not of several hundred.
Yeah. So she, Kev, I assume is a man. According to his bio, he lives in Edinburgh, so he's got Old Reekie, which is a Scots term for Edinburgh. It means the old smoky. It is a Scottish term for Edinburgh.
He writes to her.
Yeah.
In response to this, actually, it was in response to another follow-up thing where Rowling had posted her 4 things, and a TRA wrote, "You want people dead for simply expressing their gender identity, so shut the F up." And she wrote back, "I'm sure you can back up that assertion with a quote of mine, because otherwise it might look like you're exactly the kind of person I'm describing. Fixed beliefs, zero evidence, inventing grievances to justify a desire to silence people who say things you don't like." So that was one of her first big follow-ups to what her definitions against an irrational, response from the people she's talking about. So that was a T-ball for her. Let me launch on that, buddy, because you're exactly what I'm talking about. Kev R writes in and says, fixed beliefs. What beliefs have you changed, J.K.? Always astonishing people, call her Joe or J.K. Hey, buddy, Anyway, someday we'll have to do a show about what we would call, Mrs. Murray when we meet her. Anyway, so she responds. Do you want to read this response? Because it's really, as you said.
It is. So she writes, I used to believe nurture was everything and that nature wasn't important. My belief changed because of my own life experience and from reading studies about genetic inheritance. So nurture.
That's a Lumos thing, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah, it could be. Could also be with discussion with her medical doctor husband. But we know Joe writes extensively anyway. We may be interested by her knowledge of inheritance and DNA in future strike stories. But so nature essentially is your biological inheritance. Nurture is your lived experience.
I don't know if this is what you're referring to, but there's a big debate right now in the UK about consanguinity, which is usually just cousin incest. And there are studies that show that every generation in which there's consanguinity, because this thing tends to repeat itself through generations, you have what is it? Is it a 12-point or a 12% drop in IQ? If Rowling has done research in that, that's a nature element, right? It's not just a.
Yeah, that's right. So I think very famously the Austrian Habsburg, where it in Austro-Hungary, the nobility were so closely related. They all had the Habsburg forehead, the very high forehead, and lots of other genetic issues.
Yeah, blood diseases. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt you all through this, Nick, because this is so good. Every one of these paragraphs, I don't want to have to do the whole thing at once.
Yeah.
Next.
Now, Rowling's comprehensive experience was almost the same as mine, and about the same time. So she's got 5 years on me, but my education absolutely was the same. So it stressed the nurture as important rather than the nature, which I think was understandable in the comprehensive, which was a socialist system. The comprehensive education was to try and get each child to their maximum potential. So there should have been no bias about what any child could achieve based upon their parents' profession. Then she goes on, in my early 20s, I believed the difference between the sexes was entirely due to socialization. I no longer believe that for the same reasons above. Again, this was a very common left-wing belief. And it would have been, certainly through my education years, it would have been the accepted norm that the only reason that there is a measurable difference between the sexes is because we treat them differently. Now that's
a giant confession on her part.
It is.
That puts her into a category of feminist and separates her from another category of feminists.
It does, but I think time also has created that separation. So I think anyone who believes in objective evidence, there is enough objective evidence now to demonstrate that there is a fundamental difference between the sexes. And that's not a value judgment. Of course, it's not a value judgment. Like many heterosexual men, I think women are marvelous, but they are different. So the next one is also a really key one, and this puts her into 1980s socialism. Absolutely. I used to believe in unilateral nuclear disarmament. I no longer do. So that was in the UK, the campaign, CND, Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament, was huge. Many of Rowling's colleagues in the TERF movement, particularly lesbian TERFs, quite a few of those were members of the Greenham Common encampment. Now, Greenham Common was a United States Air Force base where they based Tomahawk cruise missiles and also nuclear weapons for use on aircraft within Europe, and that encampment, that largely almost entirely women encampment, lasted for at least a decade, many years. So again, believing in unilateral nuclear disarmament in the 80s was not unusual by any means.
That was definitely Rowling's communist period. The whole Jessica period, and it's wonderful to read that she now realizes that the
Yeah.
Soviet Union, there was no trusting them to nuclear disarmament. That was one of the great naive periods
Yes.
of liberal. I guess it's all been naive, but that was one of the most ridiculous ones.
But over here in the socialist paradise of the United Kingdom, we have a much more nuanced understanding of communism and the various different forms of communism. So even, I mean, now, of course, communism as a straight political belief is incredibly unpopular. It even down to the give each to what they need and each to produce to how they are able, even that very simplistic belief or the means of production into the hands of the people is not a popular belief. So the Communist Party of Great Britain now is really down on its heels. But even those communists, the CPGB, are not what we would describe as tankies. So the big split in UK communists happened in 1956 with the invasion of Hungary by the Soviet Union. The people that still believed that the Soviet Union was on the right track and they believed in the Communist Internationale, they were the tankies. And again, they were in quite a small minority. They were always the most virulent wing of the party. The rest, and that was really the beginning of the end in 1956. The majority of the members there's no excuse now for not seeing the horror of what the Soviet Union was.
That's when about Jessica Mitford. That's when she finally did not renew her membership in the Communist Party. And she was living in the United States at that point. Yes. But all the things that she had written about it, of course, are the things, the books that Rowling has celebrated as things that she likes. So anyway, that's a great distinction. But that was, it's interesting that Rowling immediately said, I'm not the naive, progressive, liberal Labour Party member that I was back then.
No. The next one actually was more surprising for me. So I used to believe cannabis was essentially harmless. I no longer do because I've witnessed it wreaking havoc on someone I care about's mental health. Now, that's really still quite a popular opinion in the UK that cannabis is essentially harmless. But really, anyone who knows someone who has become an habitual user of cannabis over many years, unless they've got their eyes closed absolutely shut, can see the damage that it can do to people.
I mean, the United States legalization is still spreading. And in the UK, I believe it's still illegal. It's still a regulated drug, and comes with jail time for smoking openly. Is that
no? So I think supplying, you are at a moderate risk of jail time.
Okay.
Being seen in possession, you're much more likely just to get a warning and a record. If you are driving a vehicle and they test your blood and you're under the influence of it, it's treated just like alcohol. But it is still illegal. So, if a policeman walks past you and they can smell it on you, then you can expect to get searched, and your pockets turned out. They will record your name and address, and you have been marked. It
Well,
isn't legalized anywhere except for medical uses. So I have a dear friend who is suffering from advanced multiple sclerosis, and she uses cannabis, not in a smokable form, but in a tablet form to help manage her symptoms. But outside of that medical use, with a prescription, then it's still absolutely illegal.
And this, in the United States, the medical use of marijuana has made basically free use of marijuana. You have to get like a form that doesn't require any kind of proof that you need it for medicine, and so everyone can get the little form and go to their pothead shop and buy as much as they want. Now, there's an American reporter, formerly of the New York Times, who left the New York Times because he was such a success as a writer of thrillers. A man named Alex Berenson, who I think most people know today because of his. He was part of the COVID disinformation dozen that was censored on Twitter. He was brought up on charges. I mean, he was really crushed because he just kept reporting all the data about COVID rather than just the narrative from big pharma and media, which is basically a prisoner of big pharma. And Berenson was the book that he had written just before the COVID madness was a book called "Tell Your Children," in which he explains that using smoking marijuana and using it on a daily basis is why we're having so many people experience psychotic breaks. And that's his wife is a medical doctor, and she first brought this up to him. He was shocked. He thought, like everybody else, that hey, cannabis is just a young person's whiskey. And he did the research. He's an investigative reporter. And he wrote this book saying, the marijuana that exists today is not your grandmother's marijuana in the 60s. This is, a hybrid plant that has extraordinary psychoactive effects. So that was to me. I was with you when I saw that. I thought, oh, good.
Yeah.
Rowling's aware of the evidence, and she's also open to her experience, saying, hey, that thing you believe. Look this in the face and tell me you still believe that. And make that shift. That I think is very much like the psychological tool that she uses or did use at one point, the cognitive behavior therapy, where you look at a belief and you have to examine whether it's any good for you or not. Is this belief working for me? Well, when you look at somebody else and you see something that openly contradicts something that you believe in an unexamined way, if you have the reflex to hold up your belief and say, you know what, I don't think I believe that anymore, as a conscious choice, that's a mature adult, as much as it means being illiberal or not a fundamentalist or whatever. And Rowling, she's evidencing in this thing that's her. That puts her outside of, you talked about the center liberal thing, which of course would be the liberal side of things in the United States. But I don't think that's a consensus opinion at all in that political spectrum. No. Is that my projection, or?
Yeah, no, absolutely not. It's another fashionable belief that drugs should be legalized, and again, for the more fashionable end of people who have no experience of addiction, have never met a drug addict in their life, it's very fashionable to believe that all drugs should be legalized. Just crazy.
On to the next one.
Yeah. Okay, so this is a hot topic in the UK at the moment. So I used to believe in assisted dying. I no longer do, largely because I'm married to a doctor who opened my eyes to the possibilities of coercion of sick or vulnerable people. So huge debate in the UK at the moment. huge impassioned debate.
Well, again,
Unfortunately, it looks like we have a law that's going to be passed within the next year or so to allow assisted dying or state sanctioned suicide in the UK.
and I think she soft pedals this one because Neil
Yeah,
Murray didn't open her eyes to the possibilities. He gave her hard data from
yeah,
from places where this has become legal and what happens.
yes,
There's no mystery involved in this issue anymore. We know what happens
yeah,
when the state sanctifies assisted suicide.
yes,
So she kind of soft pedaled that one, but still, that was, as you said, that was to put herself on the side of,
yeah.
frankly, religious groups predominantly, if I'm not wrong, if the UK is like the US, it's the religious groups that are saying, "Are you out of your mind? You know that
Well,
you're gonna give
there's
this power to the state." Um,
there's quite an amount of true socialist pushback as well. So yes,
okay, that's
we've got religious pushback against it. But when I say true socialist, it's people like myself that are concerned about the effect this will have on society. So we're in an aging population. People are getting sicker for longer. Um, my concern is that society will expect people to end their lives when they become a burden.
now this has um, several important things in terms of Rowling because
Yeah,
um, our conversations about induced abortion and trying through the texts to see where Rowling steps on this, we've come to a pretty, what we think is a pretty, maybe that's where these beliefs came from. That's entirely speculative. But what she believes, and she has the characters that represent her inside the books, and those who are bad characters, we're seeing that what she believes about abortion. Coerced death in the United States, at least, is almost always by those who are for it and against it is put in the context of abortion. That those people who are for wide open abortion rights, abortion as a form of birth control, induced abortion as a form of birth control, um, are also the ones that are like, hey, this person wants to die. They're unhappy with their living. Let them kill themselves. And because both those people, the unborn who have no voice, no protection, are very much like those people at the end of life who can be manipulated into saying, do this for your children and for your country and those things. Don't be a drag on the NHS. Save the NHS. Now that for Rowling to take a step back from that, the coercion of sick or vulnerable people. The most vulnerable people are obviously these people who are not yet born. Right in the line behind them are the people that are of age and who have had a long life, et cetera. So her to take that position, I thought was interesting in that context. Is that true in the UK as well?
no, no, not so much. Of course, there's absolutely some crossover. So if your religious belief uh, refuses to accept that people should be allowed the choice of having an induced abortion, it's extremely unlikely that your religious faith will accept the idea of self-murder, essentially. So of course there's some crossover, but really the arguments that we've heard and lots of impassioned arguments are for people who are facing their own death and are scared, people who have known people who have had horrific experiences of end of life, and those who are concerned about the effect this will have on vulnerable people. And anyone who's approaching their end of their life is a vulnerable person, but also the disabled, um, uh, uh, people who there are areas of the NHS that are struggling. thankfully, my experience of the hospice system has been positive. So we've got a really great, really wonderful hospice locally. But there are some areas where they're not having the positive experiences that I've had of that. If I had a close family member who had a really bad end of life, I think that may affect my decision. But I don't have the faith in um, in the establishment not to overreach.
I was always Nick. I love his conversations because, as we've said before, you and I don't come from the same worlds, and I want to highlight that here. That for me, euthanasia is as horrific as induced abortions, infanticide. I mean, they're just, basically, eliminating the helpless. And so that's a horrific thing. You have a different view coming from, obviously, from a different angle than I do. I wanted to share something that Rowling said in the Witch Hunt podcast that she did about the
Yeah,
trans war. And it was about abortion, and a friend of hers, one of my very dearest friends. Now, I mean, we have a pretty good idea of who her very dearest friends are, but one of my very dearest friends is a committed and practicing Catholic. Now, that really narrows things down, doesn't it, Nick?
it,
And then she says
particularly
he's
if there's a
also.
that's the
She says it's a
pronoun.
he.
Yeah,
It's a he. You know, very dear friend, Catholic, and it's a he. Anyway, one of my very dearest friends is a committed and practicing Catholic, and he's also pro-life. Now, I'm a feminist. I'm pro-choice. Interesting she chose that word. I understand exactly what his arguments are, and I respect his argument. There's a key phrase. And
yeah,
he is prepared to make his argument. If it's who I think it is, I bet he is. I don't agree with his argument, but he respects my argument. And we are both able to find shades of gray within our beliefs. I think that is healthy. I think that is productive. I am not going to cut that person out of my life because we disagree on something, albeit something that is very important to me. This is more than she said anywhere, I think, about abortion.
no,
We have lost that respect and ability to agree to disagree in this particular debate. Now, that's this particular debate, meaning the trans wars. And really, Rowling, especially in the way she expressed this, I can see the possibilities for coercion. She's not saying that it's ethically a horror to murder someone who is essentially helpless and voiceless. Largely, I think, because she's pro-choice. But she copes that she's against coercion from state agents. Okay, that's a different thing,
yeah,
right? And we talk about the shades of gray within our beliefs. We may still come down on the same side. We haven't arrived at the same reasons, or we end up differing, but we've come at it with respect for people that are moral, ethical, intelligent people that care, people that have some capacity for empathy. Anyway, just real quickly, do you think this is Sean Harris?
yes, absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's that's a fascinating thing that she has a dear friend who is a committed and practicing Catholic. Now, be a practicing Catholic is not that's not a small thing. I mean, you can look that up, what it
yeah,
means to be a practicing Catholic. You can't commune of the body and blood of Christ in the Catholic Church, according to the magisterium and the statements that have been made by popes, at least for the last 50 years now, and believe at the same time that a woman has an unchallenged right to murder her unborn child. That, you can't be that practicing Catholic. So if that's Sean Harris, he's got a really strong belief. And I don't know of anyone in her circle of friends. But here's my question to you about Hallmarked Man, Nick. We're going to spin this
yeah.
one. Do you think this is exactly what I do? What Sean and Nadine Harris gave to Rowling that she thought she would never have again? the ability to have an argument with a friend that takes a position that's, essentially polar opposite to her own, and they still can remain friends who admire and
I,
respect her.
I, I, I don't think so. And the reason I don't think so is this is not, it's the first time I think explicitly we can say this is about this person. So this person disagrees with her on this topic. They've talked about it. They're respectful. They're still friends. And we know they're still friends because she's just had a book launch with prominently featuring Sean and his wife. So she said in the past other really heated topics. So Scottish independence. So the two tribes who went to war in Scotland were the yeses and the noes. So they were the yes to independence or no to independence. And she said that some of her closest friends are yeses. They disagree fundamentally about whether it's right for Scotland to be independent of the United Kingdom or
Okay.
not, but they still respect each other. So I don't think this is unique.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. But we're still looking for what that thing is that Sean
I
and
know.
Nadine Harris gave her.
And it sounds huge, doesn't it? It sounds really important. So I do
You don't think
hope.
it's a charm bracelet? You don't think it's
No. No, because that if you were strike, you would then be saying, well, the key suspect in the case of the stolen charm bracelet is Sean Harris if he comes back with it after all these years. Um,
I do think that somebody somewhere has one of the most valuable pieces of jewelry that they don't. I don't think that thing was melted down, Nick, for the silver content. I think that somebody has that charm bracelet from Rowling's mother.
yeah,
All right. Now, we got the last 2 points here,
we've got
which
the big
are
guns. We've got the
that
big
are
guns now.
this is where this is all those things that she talked about up to here.
Yeah,
I don't think anybody's going to remember. And I don't think those were opinions that really, I mean, they were cut and dried for her. I had this idea, I changed it. I had this idea, I
yeah,
changed it. And then she brings up an issue that is not one of those, I had this belief and I changed it.
no,
This is one where she's struggling.
yeah.
Go ahead.
So,
Just give us
and
the
she,
first
she
part of this.
and she's spoken about this before, but this is a new take on it. So I've struggled with religious faith since my mid-teens. So that would put her still in Wydeen before she went into the sixth form, or maybe just as she's going into the sixth form. So sixth form would be 17, 18 years old. I appear to have a God-shaped vacuum inside me, but I never seem quite able to make up my mind what to do about it.
Wow. Now, for those people who are not Christians, the God-shaped vacuum comment there, which is clearly the money phrase there inside there, is a reference to I'm almost certain to one that's made by Saint Augustine, that human beings have a God-shaped hole in their heart, and they try to fill it with many other things, but there's only
Yeah,
one thing that satisfies that. She being a writer of her capabilities, changes that to a vacuum, which is a different thing than a hole.
yeah,
This is something that's drawing God into the heart. And
yes,
she doesn't say the heart. She just says a God-shaped vacuum inside me, because she has a very specific esoteric Christian, really Estechian, Coleridgean idea of the heart, which is right in line with traditional Christianity. And so here she's citing that, and she says that I appear to have, like, she doesn't welcome this. This is something that's of great discomfort to her, but she
yes,
acknowledges that she has this God-shaped vacuum inside me, and that she struggled with that since she was in her mid-teens. I don't think she struggled with it before that, because she was probably unaware of the church, which is the institution of faith among Christians, she was unaware of her practices and beliefs coming into conflict with that, which happens to people. I'm sure women at menarche and men in adolescence. The Christian church has explicit rules and dogma about sexual behaviors, and she's an intelligent woman. That was a conflict to her, I think. But it didn't make her say, "There's no, that's only for the stupid people. There's nothing to Christianity. There's nothing." She said it made me aware that I have this God-shaped vacuum inside me, and yet I can't embrace it. Is that a fair reading?
Yes, I think so. So I think that rather than I didn't read this as a lament for a lack of religious faith or spirituality. I read that as a tacit admission in a belief in God. Because otherwise, how do you have a God-shaped vacuum if you don't believe that thing exists? And we know
she's struggling with religious faith specifically.
Yes, I think so. And we know she's spoken before about her belief in the immortal soul. And if you believe in the immortal soul, you have to believe in God. Yeah.
So, this is for people that haven't followed this for you. I wrote, my genesis as a Potter pundit was in my pushing back against the Harry haters who, were calling Rowling a witch and that she was the gateway to the occult. And she had, this was poison to young Christian minds. And I pushed back on that and just showed all the Christian content inside the work. Which, I think in my first book, I had 4 of the 7 shed tools in it because it was just from her very first books. That was obvious that she had used those tools. Now that, something that she said repeatedly through the years is a quote from Graham Greene. Forgive me if that's wrong. That, my faith is very, very important to me, but I don't have a good grip on it. I forget what the actual quote is, but it's that she lives in doubt, but that when she does have faith, when she does have that, she's described herself as leading an intensely spiritual life. But the conflict is with religious faith. And so that's what gives her these doubts about whether she can really claim the mantle of being a Christian. She always pushes back against that.
Yeah.
Hogwarts is a non-denominational school, that kind of thing. Which I don't think was born. I mean, the fact that she puts that since my mid-teens, you can't say that was born out of the Potter panic years. Where the Harry haters were really, saying that she was Wiccan or whatever. All right, on to the next paragraph. Now, unless you've got something else to share about that.
No. So this is so this gets even more interesting. So she essentially sums up by saying, I could probably list at least 20 more things I've changed my mind about. I don't currently have a single belief that couldn't be altered by clear, concrete evidence, and in all but one case, I know what that evidence would have to be. This makes my engineer heart sing.
To me, it makes me laugh. I mean, I just laugh out loud at that. That's so obviously not true, but go on.
The exception is the God conundrum, because I don't know what I'd have to see to make me come down firmly on either side. I suppose that's the meaning of faith, believing without seeing proof, and that's why I'll probably go to my grave with that particular personal matter unresolved.
Wow. How does she reconcile the contradiction of her work with that rationalist, Enlightenment era nonsense? I mean, that is just such. I mean, pins her into an historical period that understands, this the great leap of faith. You
Yeah.
have to abandon reason to be a believer, when just the opposite is true. And that's you have to abandon reason not to be a believer. But anyways, but she definitely. You talked earlier about how people growing up in a certain age had certain beliefs.
Yeah.
But Rowling, because of the bubble world that she lives in, of, you call them centered liberals or whatever, of which this kind of soft atheism is just in the atmosphere, can write books that are just crowded with Christian content.
Yeah.
That's coherent. It's not random. It's not um, um, something that she shops from the shelf and just drops in to show that she knows what that represents. Uh, and then she uses soul characters and characteristics and things like that. I mean, all the tools that she uses, except for the ones that are just literary, the traditional tools he uses that are really the defining signatures of her work include ideas about a cardiac intelligence, about the heart, that that obviously transcends the rational. It's a transpersonal factor, faculty. That she talks about these things, and you're just like, and then she comes up with this pablum about believing without seeing proof is just something that she can't tolerate. That's non-thinking, and yet she talks about the imagination creating greater empathy, and that's only possible if you understand the imagination as Coleridge defines it. So it's which is to say that it's a transpersonal faculty of soul. That's and reading and the imagination are so central to her whole life's purpose. This logos that she has as a writer is so wrapped up in that, and yet she makes this statement of champagne agnosticism, just I think just to separate herself from believers. Now that's I just sit there and just laugh. Like, wow, here's a woman who is so self-aware and is so has a list of 20 or more beliefs that she's shed through her life because of just experience and reflection, that on the most important one, which she forces to the front of the line to discuss, she reveals that she really hasn't given this much thought at all. Or that she's saying something which is, I don't know, Nick, is this misdirection?
No,
anyway.
I think she is a thoughtful woman, and I think, like a lot of believers, she measures her faith against the struggle. So if she thought, well, I'm a Christian, so I believe it's true, she would count that as fairly poor faith. I think it's the fact that she struggles with her belief in the eternal soul, her belief in God, and her acceptance of Christianity. I think because she struggles with that struggle is what makes it important. And maybe it's because of that struggle is why we see all this imagery in her work, because it is an important part of her life.
The point is well made, Nick. I mean, I'm afraid that my belief that she is a esoteric Christian, that phrase you used in a previous podcast, rather than a exoteric believer, someone who is willing to conform to the beliefs and practices of a church. My belief in that makes this, because this sounds like someone that doesn't believe that. And so maybe my belief, what someone could say to me, what evidence, John, do you need to abandon the idea that Rowling is a Christian? I don't know. This is not sufficient for me. I have too much experience of her work and its effect on readers to not think that she is this esoteric Christian. But I can think immediately of, she says, I don't currently have a single belief that couldn't be altered by clear, concrete evidence. That's nonsense, Nick. There is clear, concrete evidence that abortion is the extinction of a human life.
Yes.
Nothing could make her say, I mean, she may think that it's inhuman, as Robin thinks, to not grieve for that child's death, but she's still on board with killing that death. And feminists, one of whom she admires, have said, let's be very clear, it needs to be legal, but it's the people that recognize it for what it is understand that it's a murder.
Yeah.
And if you're not willing to understand, so there's one thing. How about any argument against same-sex attraction as being anything beyond a mental illness? To her, there would be no evidence for that being true that would make her anything but homophobia. She has a clear path. Any argument against same-sex attraction means you're homophobic. You can't be a researcher. You can't do anything like that. IQ tests that say that there's racial differences, Asians, whites, blacks, Hispanics, Japanese, whatever. That there are definite IQ differences in these populations that some argue with statistical evidence is that determined. Now, you could say it's cultural, that you get back to the nature nurture thing, but I don't think there's any evidence that would possibly swing her on that point. And then there's
I don't know. I think there's
and then how about Islamophobia too? There is no violence that Islamicists can do in the United Kingdom that would make her say, hey, these people need to police their own stuff. We have to stop protecting Muslims against backlash when their community consistently creates these terrorist attacks.
Because that's different evidence that you would need to persuade Rowling. So you would need to persuade Rowling on the justifiability of collective punishment. And I don't think anybody's done that yet.
But she's saying that she doesn't know what the evidence would be.
Yeah.
That could do that. She doesn't have a single belief that couldn't be altered by clear, concrete evidence.
So to change my mind to that point, John, you would have to show me evidence that collective punishment was both morally justifiable and had a positive impact on society.
I think you know me well enough that I'm not arguing for collective punishment.
Yeah.
We're arguing for harsh punishment for the people that commit these crimes and not being soft on them because they're in a protected class.
I would agree with that wholeheartedly.
There we go. And I don't think Rowling is there yet because when soon as Islamic terrorism happens, she immediately says, "Oh, it's going to be a bad day to be a driver in London." That's not the reflex of someone who's like, "Wow, we really need to punish these Islamicists for these things." Because in the United Kingdom, they know who the Metropolitan Police and others know where the radical Islamicist sects are, and they are not, they're protecting them rather than prosecuting them.
I don't think that's true. I think just being a member of a radical sect is not illegal.
Absolutely, I believe that, but those people, when they commit crimes, especially the crimes against young white children, who are the children who are targeted because they're young and white, that group has been prosecuted to some degree, but was given a pass for several decades. And Rowling only at the very end of the line, when friends in her private circle said that this was a bad thing. The woman that was responsible, Julie Bindel.
Julie Bindel, marvelous
Yeah,
woman.
when one of Rowling's friends was the person that was bringing this forward, then she put up one or two tweets saying, yeah, that's really a bad thing, what was going on there. But again, that was 15 years after the fact. There are clearly things in Rowling's, worldview.
Yeah.
And I mean, for example, this was the pushback when she came after Emma Watson. I don't know if we're done with this yet, but this is again, just like the contradiction of Rowling's statement that you're a fundamentalist if you have a belief that can't be changed. Well, that's one of Rowling's objective truths, that she doesn't believe there's any evidence that could change. So it's the statement is inherently a contradiction. It's illogical. She's saying, except for this objective belief that I'm offering to you, all beliefs that can't be disproven are, evidence that you're a fundamentalist. Okay. I mean, that happens when you try to make these big, broad statements. You contradict yourself. Here, she's doing that again, I think, where she's saying that, I don't currently have a single belief that couldn't be altered by clear, concrete evidence. We just know that isn't the case. I think. Now
I think it's
if she had qualified that with, if she had just qualified that with "of which I am aware," that would have been something. But she's claiming that she has an objective awareness of herself, that there's no more any belief. She's gone through them all, and this one doesn't work.
Yeah, but that is the liberal position, and that's fundamental to science, and it's fundamental to engineering. Is you go where the evidence points you, and it's a good day in the office when the evidence tells you you're wrong, because your next solution is going to be better.
Well, if I would send her 5 books, Nick, I can pull them from my shelf, that would explain to her why it's more than rational to be a believer than it is to be a person in this cloud of, talking about God as a conundrum. Yeah. Do you think she would read them? Do you think she'd have any interest in actually exploring that belief?
So you've recommended some books to me, and one of the most powerful actually was by a Catholic author, Ross Tuthat, I believe. And I think I read that book as sort of a trajectory, and a how-to. Very much it suits United Kingdom, soft socialist, likes to think they're liberal personality.
Is that why I recommended it to you, Nick?
I think so. I wonder if she has read it, actually. The most powerful, most challenging chapter for me was the last 2, where Ross is essentially saying, okay, so if you're still with me, you believe in God, what are you going to do about that now? And I wonder if that's where Rowling has stalled, because I don't think there is an organized religion that she's got much depth of knowledge that is really speaking to her. We've got a new Archbishop of Canterbury just about to be installed in the UK. It's the first female Archbishop that we've had in the Church of England. And I wonder if there's a conversation there. I bet she could get an interview with Rowling.
She's had contact with previous archbishops of Canterbury, Nick.
Yeah,
at least the son of one. He was the filmmaker for a year in the life, or was it a day in the life?
A year in the life. No, was it Harry Potter and Me? I think it was the earlier one, wasn't it? Harry Potter and Me.
It was the one that came out right at the publication of Deathly Hallows. I think that was.
That's a year in the life. Yeah, that's a year in the life.
anyway, this is obviously a really to Potter pundits, Rowling studies people, serious strikers. This is the kind of question and conversation that we've wanted to have for years. And here Rowling just volunteered it. The guy really didn't ask her, "Hey, what are your beliefs? What are your religious beliefs? Just fixed beliefs. What beliefs have you changed?" And she offered this up. It clearly, like Deathly Hallows is largely Harry Potter there. All through the book, he struggles with faith in, the cartoon image of God the Father, Albus Dumbledore. And he finally comes down on the side of faith in Dumbledore. And everything, comes to its end. It works out wonderfully. Now that, it was accepted as kind of her resolution of faith, but that was really what the whole series was about. And in terms of what caused her to write that series, I think it would be something that made her struggle with religious faith.
Yeah.
Not only the adolescent, hey, wow, do I really believe all these things they're saying inside this church that next door to where I grew up? But more the things that happened to her as she matured in college and came to take it. Certainly the things that happened in the years immediately preceding the inspiration for Harry Potter. And that's a conversation that we'd love to have with her, and we can be confident that we only have 25 years of experience. That's not an interview that she'll be open to. Oh, well, you're out there. D. Brooks is out there. D, schedule us. We're happy. We'll fly. We'll come to you. Anyway, it's seriously one of the most fascinating, unforced conversation. I think it's a reflection in a way of how much Rowling was disturbed in the days immediately after Charlie Kirk's death.
Yeah.
That in a way she had even greater thoughts about her own mortality in the wake of Kirk's assassination. That she was talking about, I'll probably go to my grave with that particular personal matter unresolved. She's thinking about going to her grave next year. I mean, that's that phrase came to mind. I think that's more than just a rhetorical twist there. This conversation morphs, I think, into the whole idea about the whole conversation about beliefs. I think led to, obviously in response to Emma Watson's interview, but the particular take she took on it. What was your thinking there?
So I watched the over 2 hour interview with,
wow. Thank you, Nick, for taking one for the team. That's great.
With Emma Watson. I left feeling somewhat sorry for her, particularly given the devastating slapdown of Rowling's response, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But she comes across as incredibly naive, and not very sophisticated person. So I think what's important to Watson is that everybody loves her. An understandable response in a child, but not really an adult position that you can take. So these wildly contradicting beliefs. So supporting, and aside from the transgender issue, you can, if you believe that trans women by some kind of transubstantiation can physically change their sex, then fine, that's your belief. You're wrong, but great, that's your belief. But supporting them so publicly in response to what J.K. Rowling has said, so coming out with statements directly after J.K. Rowling has outed herself, is giving support to people that were attacking J.K. Rowling. Then expecting J.K. Rowling to not just return, but accept your love of them is an incredibly naive position. Given that, and saying that she's open for a conversation, yeah, almost childlike in her response, and compare and contrast John with Rowling's post, which was basically an evisceration of Emma Watson.
And that it's interesting. I've talked about the illogic of, or just the contradictory nature of several of the things that Rowling has asserted in these statements, or is there just a pointing substance or lack of substance? You should know that you do know that Emma Watson went to an American Ivy League university. She went to Brown University, and you probably don't know what Brown University's reputation is in the United States. And that is that it's the absolute weakest educational institution that still has retained Ivy League status. That they don't have any curriculum or required courses there. At least they didn't back in the 70s and 80s when friends of mine went there. I went to a prep school that sent 30 people to every Ivy League school. And they've always been the wokest of the thing, which is really saying something of the Ivies. And it's a thin school in terms of demands on examining your opinions. You're going to get a full indoctrination into the beliefs of the world and not much else. Which is, tragic and sad, but that's where she elected to go, and she probably had her choice at any university in the world. She chose Brown. Now she's living in Oxford, right? She's studying towards her Doctor of Philosophy in creative writing. Not especially, not really. That's not electrical engineering and computer science, Nick.
No, it's not. So I think she was doing a master's in creative writing, which she's converted to a doctorate. So my assumption is she's working on a piece of work that will be sufficient to get her doctorate in creative writing.
And I don't know if you know this, but one of the things that she wrote towards her first degrees in creative writing was about a fabulously famous film star that arrives at a university campus and is bewildered by what her fame does in terms of how people receive her. It's like, wow, that was a real stretch for your imagination. I mean, she lives in an eight bedroom apartment in Oxford. I don't care if these bedrooms are closets, Nick. An 8-bedroom home, driving she probably can't drive her Audi because she drove too fast through the streets of Oxford. I mean, really, this is Rowling eviscerates her by saying you live at such remove from the people in this trans thing. You've always been a child of privilege. You've never encountered what life on the ground is like. You have no idea what it's like to be in a prison cell when all of a sudden a man comes in claiming he's a woman. I mean, all those things that she said, and it's Rowling. So there were no punches pulled in there. I mean,
I lived in poverty when I was writing the book that made you famous.
Yeah. And that takedown, of course, left her vulnerable. That was the contradiction inside that post. And she was almost immediately called on it in the thread. Yeah. Was like, wow, all of us who are living in Islamicist ghettos and cannot escape, we'd appreciate it if you would say something about us, but you're so above that. And those Islamicist ghettos didn't exist when you were writing the first Harry Potter thing. I mean, those people immediately said, how about it? That you're, now, I'm sympathetic to that view. That's a contradiction, but I'm also sympathetic to the fact that Rowling can't talk about every cause.
No.
She's not going to talk about, she'll talk about women in Afghanistan that suffer under an Islamicist, terror regime. That's pretty straightforward. That's like being against illiteracy, but she won't ever talk about the Palestinians in Gaza that are, being pushed into the water. Now that, or blown up. And that, I can see why she wouldn't want to do that, because she's invested in one issue, which is women's rights. And that's, you have to choose your battles. I get that. But do you see the pushback from people now saying, wow, honey, you can't, make that charge and dismiss us. And someone did, and she says, "Oh, are you still out there?" Meaning, you're a moron, that are concerned about people on the ground who can't escape, Muslim immigration changing the culture of their community. She just dismisses him as a fundamentalist Islamophobe, right, Nick? I said that's where you do the okay, that's not a good look for you. You can say, I haven't, just ignore it because you're not going to fight every battle, but to push back against it and say that's not a legitimate criticism, that's tough. That's tough, Nick. But the Emma Watson thing she already has taken down Emma Watson in the pages of Christmas Pig.
Yes, I don't know how widely recognized that is. You and I spotted it almost immediately.
Well, I tell you, that's a tough one to miss. She talks about a young actress that is totally consumed by her success and conforming to other people's opinions and stuff. Whew, that was and then she, that because it's happiness that is speaking about the person who has lost her happiness because of that nature.
Yeah.
What other young actresses does she know? I mean, that to me was a transparency. I mean, the fact that you and I both saw it independently to me was, I think that's, I don't think that Watson could have read that and not said, is she talking about me? Because at that point, Watson had largely disappeared.
Yeah.
Anyway, yes, wasn't this the last show you said I'm the shock jock that says things are going to, I can imagine people there saying, oh my gosh, Granger is insane, this is funny because I'll say all these things about, I joked in the last episode saying, look, the only place that Rowling and I see eye to eye is when we're standing together at a cocktail party and she doesn't have heels on, we're the same height, but that's the only place we see eye to eye. People say that I'm a toady to Rowling, that I'm some sort of sycophant. I'm like, that Rowling has a legion of sycophants. Go to her Twitter feeds and you'll see all the sycophants lined up.
This is another core belief of a lot of people. Is if you disagree with an artist, you have no business enjoying her art. Which is, but we both enjoy old novels. I don't think there's a single Victorian author that I would want to have a full evening's conversation with.
Really? not Disraeli? I'd love to have a conversation with Disraeli. He was a novelist. That's this is, for me, it's something like the Dr. Dolittle novelist. Was it? I want to say it was Hugh Lofting. He wrote some of the most, I don't often use this word, but the most, obviously racist books. The Africans in the books are just, they're worse than cartoons. They're like, Nazi propaganda about Jews. It's just like, wow. How do you overlook that? But then do you say you can't appreciate Dr. Dolittle?
I'm reading a lot of Anthony Trollope at the moment, and like a lot of Victorian authors, he has a very caricature attitude to Jewish people. But doesn't mean I can't. I have to stop enjoying the stories. They're still great stories.
That's right. And they say a lot about the human condition as well. In fact, they foster the attitude that makes you step back from those failings in the work.
Yeah.
If you don't read J.K. Rowling and experience a growth in empathy and of penetration because of the shock she gives you at the finish, all the things that you missed because you just went along with the narrative and the narrators. That's largely what she does,
Yes.
right, Nick? I mean, is to blow that up, and she also with her artistry,
Yeah.
she actually fosters this cardiac intelligence, this heart faculty of soul, which is transpersonal. It's like conscience. Uh, and you're a better person for exercising that faculty in an edifying environment, even if it's loaded with pregnancy traps, fornication, abortion. I mean, the book itself is still, the net is an edifying, challenging experience. That Rowling and I don't see eye to eye. Nick, we don't see eye to eye because you stand about a foot taller than I do. I have to stand on I have to stand on a bench to see you eye to eye, and a pretty tall bench too. And I'm talking about like a footstool. Anyway, and yet we both have a similar experience of these books.
Yeah.
And a profound admiration for the author. When she gets into things though, where she talks about, she starts defining terms and she pins it to the top of her post like this is wisdom straight from the mountain. I'm just like, wow, that's not your thing. This is like Socrates goes to the poets and asks them, who's the wisest man in Greece or something, or he was accused of being the wisest man in Greece, and so he goes to the philosophers and he goes to the poets and the others and people with assumed wisdom, and finds out that they're essentially morons because they can't even explain their own poetry and their own inspiration. Rowling, I'm afraid, the poetry is as challenging in a way as actually the poetry, the imaginative qualities and the content of her work is as challenging and moving in its own way as anything from Aeschylus or Sophocles, in my opinion. So it's obviously much more accessible to an American reader of the 21st century, but that still, I think that's the case. I think she would also fail the Socrates test, where he would immediately expose her contradictions and her blind spots, to include the one that says, I don't currently have a single belief that couldn't be altered by a clear, concrete evidence. That's something that if it's not qualified by that I'm aware of, comes off as just outrageous arrogance.
So, John, we've
yes.
moved from Emma Watson to Socrates. I think almost inevitably, we've made that journey.
You don't see the necessity of that connection? It's a necessity. It had to have gone there.
So what's up next?
How about the direction of Hogwarts Professor of the Substack?
Okay.
We're going to be doing, as I said at the beginning of the show, we're looping this back together here. It's got to be a ring. That we're still going to march through the Hallmarked Man and talk about each of the shed tools and the reflected lake springs. And then we're going to get into the golden threads as well. Because this book is really rich in that. It's probably going to take us, a year or so to get through all that. But one of the things we're going to do that people have asked us to do is to do a deep dive into the ring composition structure of this stuff. And I'm preparing with Nick's help. I'm preparing a online course about how to read J.K. Rowling, which is really a course on how to read, but anyway, how to read J.K. Rowling specifically. And the paid subscribers, I'm going to do that deep dive into Hallmarked Man, and we're going to look at each part, and we're going to talk about how it works or it doesn't work as a ring, and then how the book works as a ring, and maybe, though I doubt it, we'll talk about how it works in terms of the structure of the 10-book series, which I think that's just something you don't do until the whole thing is out. But anyway, that's going to be for paid subscribers. Because that's going to involve basically tutorial work on how people do that. If you just want to, read the results of what I come up with at the end of it, fine. That'll be available to everybody. And there's going to be plenty of free content on the site. But the paid content. If you want all the lectures that Nick and I are going to record that are going to be used for the class, those will be shown to the paid subscribers. And if you want that deep dive into the structure of Hallmarked Man specifically, and take the class on how to actually do that, then you have to be a paid subscriber. We're going to do that because I can't do the hundreds of people that we have who are free subscribers. Can't possibly help them in that way. It's really an individual thing. Nick, you've had the one-on-one tutorial. There's no way to do that for hundreds of people.
But for people who do want to get involved, I do recommend it. It's an eye-opening, mind-expanding business, and I'm looking forward to doing it again with you, John.
Yeah, I look forward to the fellowship. It's something I've done on my own, and I look forward to actually having the conversation with you as we go through the parts and the book as a whole to show what it works. Because this one's tricky. This one, when you have a 10-part book with an epilogue, is that really an 11-part book? And if it's not, then is the fifth or the sixth book the center? How are you going to split that? I'm excited about it, but I'm really excited about it because of this forum. That I'll have the people that are paid subscribers that can participate as much as they want to. If you're a paid subscriber, you don't have to participate in this, but it will be accessible to you. And if you want to join us for that, please, join the group. That's really where we're going with this. Is we're going to use the Substack site to create the material for an online course that will be available to people, especially those people that are coming back to Harry Potter because of the television program. People that basically grew up with Harry Potter, have put it on the shelf, but now they're reading it to their children. This is largely for them, but it's also for serious strikers, because everything that Rowling did with Harry Potter, she's taken up just to another level, really, in Cormoran Strike. Anyway, it's funny. This is a really long show, Nick, and I thought this was going to be something we would do in like 10 minutes. But I hope people understand that none of the things, I hope I speak for you in this as well, Nick. Again, I'm confident you'll contradict me if it isn't, is that all the things that Nick and I have said here are really off the cuff.
Yeah.
We have not done any notes on this. We haven't had any previous conversations about this. And it's something that Rowling put up one post in this same time frame where she quoted Hitler saying, "This is what the violence always has to be on the table for the true fascist." And because she quoted Hitler, immediately her enemies just said, "Oh, look, she's quoting Hitler."
There were articles. There were articles. Rowling has started quoting Hitler. Just unbelievable.
I think she said, "I've never met people as stupid as this in my life," And then she quoted some people that did absurd things, and she was like, "These people are more stupid than that." So, I hope that people won't cherry pick this conversation and say, "John said," "Oh my gosh," or even Nick let John get away with that. What's wrong with Nick? Nick's the sane man in the room. I hope that they'll consider this conversation to be a challenge to Rowling readers, serious strikers, Potter pundits, the whole alliterative bag, to think more seriously about these tweets and to recognize that tweet set from Charlie Kirk's assassination to her visceral assault on Emma Watson, try to really wake her up. I mean, talk about shock therapy. If Emma Watson's not, on the floor in a fetal position after that, I mean, man, she's going to need to talk to her therapist. That whole set is one. It has to go to the top 10 of Rowling reveals of all her interviews that she's done in the last 25 years. Is that characteristic hyperbole, John? John, Nick, Bob, Fred.
No, I think that's fair, and I think like all of her significant interviews, her significant Twitter reveals, I think we're still going to be poring over this and the results of this for some time to come.
Yeah, I'll be blushing about things I've said in the first rush. So yeah, that's difficult too. Because you know what? I'll probably change my beliefs about it, Nick.
That's what
Uh,
adults do, John. That's
oh
just
my
what adults
goodness.
do.
Are you accusing me of being adult? God, how dare you call me adult? Uh, anyway,
As
thank
always.
you as always for this, Nick. I mean,
Yeah.
this is again, this Rowling's oldest and dearest friend who disagrees on fundamentals. I think we're roughly in that set, though our friendship is of relatively recent date. Thank you for the respect you've shown for me, and please forgive me if I've been dismissive of
Oh,
your
not
ridiculous
at
socialist
all.
UK views.
That's a typical crypto-fascist response, John.
That's right. Well,
John.
you see, I'm wearing the
Yeah.
hat. That's people in the United States would be like, "Oh my gosh, he's wearing a VMI hat."
As
Not
as
not quite a
as
MAGA
all
hat, but okay.
as always, it's a joy to talk to you. And frankly, if you're having a conversation that isn't challenging, maybe you're doing it wrong. Take care, John.
Salute.